Scott Luton,
Yo, yo.
welcome to Truckin' On, my friend.
Hey, I appreciate it. Ed, I've loved watching you from afar, not too afar, but somewhat afar, and seeing this thing just take off, the conversations evolve, fun, deep, spiritual. So I can't wait to see what's in store for you this year.
Yes, sir. I would like to think that I don't know that I would be doing this without you in my life, my friend. You're my podcast mentor numero uno, and I thank you for that.
Well, you're too kind. You said that the other day, but you're taking it to a whole new art form. I mean, you know, we got different styles. Mine's that real strong business to business, and we don't. When you do that, I feel like you don't get a chance to really get to know the people as much on a human level as the great conversations you've been having. So, hey, I appreciate it, and it's great to be back with you in person for the second time in a week.
That's right. I got to do your podcast again yesterday, and that was fantastic. And you're here in my hometown of Dallas, Texas, all the way from the ATL.
That's right.
I love Atlanta. One of the greatest things when we were doing our podcast together is I would fly to Atlanta every month to do it.
That's right.
And go to in studio there with you. And I loved going to Atlanta all the time. And I just haven't needed to go there for work as much as I once did. I went to Georgia Tech back in the day and did the supply chain program there.
I remember.
So I went there a bunch for that, and I had a bunch of deals there. And I don't know, I just haven't had to go there. So I miss it.
Clearly, Atlanta is not a rock and roll real estate scene because you haven't been there in a while. So we'll have to have you back. Your Midas touch will be there, and those are great times. But I gotta say, Ward, this studio here, the equipment and the vibe, as cool as ours was, this is awesome, man. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, it started at my dining room table, and then I moved it in here last year, and now I've finally going to videotape it in here, so we've got we can share it with the world. But yeah, I love the vibe here. I've thought about moving it to like a professional studio, so I don't have to mess with anything. I can just walk in and do it. And I've thought about doing it in my office so that I could have people to help for free, basically, that are already on staff and working in the office.
Right.
But the vibe's not there.
And it's such an interesting thing because as we were talking kind of yesterday, we've done so much at Supply Chain now remotely. And, you can have great conversations and all. And that's kind of how the world has gone in so many different ways. But the in-person is just so different. And it's all about that vibe you're talking about,
Yeah, man. And I've done every single episode. I think you'll be like 118 in person.
That's my lucky number.
18 or 118? Really? That's a random lucky number. You're messing with me.
Quick shout out to Ben over there. In case you have some extra dad jokes, it's because my son Ben is hanging out just out of the reach of the camera. So he knows I like a good dad joke from time to time.
Oh yeah, I do too. I like my daughter is closer to Ben's age. She's about to be 11, and my son's 7. My daughter no longer falls for my dad jokes because my dad jokes are just messing with them.
Of course,
I have to be careful with my son and not say things like, the family of elves comes out at night. Like, if you don't go to bed on time, and then he's sleeping in my bed permanently because he's scared of the family of elves being in the house. I'm like, Levi, it's a dad joke. He's like, yeah, it might be, but I can't get those elves out of my head now.
That's the bad thing about, we lose so much as our kids get older. And while we gain conveniences, and they can strap themselves in the car, seat belts, and that's a life changer, but we lose and that innocent believability, that young kids have. We lose that and we can't fool them as easy. So anyway.
That's true. Speaking of kids.
Yes.
I like to always go back and start with the early years, and I'd like to know about your life.
Yeah.
And I normally start age 12 and go to 22 for the first portion of the episode here, but feel free to start earlier if you feel like you need to. But tell me what happened ages 12 to 22.
Yeah, well, my mom and dad met. No, just kidding. I think that 12 is a good age. That 12, 22 is a great age. Now, I was born in Augusta, GA, but I grew up in Aiken, South Carolina, just across the Savannah River, right? And had a great upbringing. As I was getting through high school, I was like, man, the last thing I want to do is go to college and study more exams and all this stuff, right? And my grades were fine, right? Looking back, but I just didn't want anything to do with that. So I called the recruiter, right? Instead of them calling me, I called the recruiter. I picked the Air Force because I loved everything related to flying and planes, all this stuff. And I found myself in basic training when I was 17 years old. Wow. Now, I should say, the Air Force basic training is not like the Marines or the Army or even the Navy. But the worst part for me, I was homesick. I mean, homesick. I'd never left home before. I miss my mom like I've never felt. I mean, I might as well have been in like China or on the moon because that's the distance that it felt.
And where were you?
San Antonio.
Okay,
back
cool.
right here, a couple hours away, right?
Yeah.
So that had a big impact. I was on active duty as a data analyst for about a year and a half.
What year was this?
This was, let's see here. Graduated in 94. So this is like 95, 96-ish.
Okay, cool.
All right?
Yeah, we're about the same age. I graduated in 96 from high school.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I forgot about that. We're talking about football and offensive linemen.
That's right.
I gotta dig up some of your best pancakes.
Did you play sports in high school?
No, I was the most average church league softball player or church league basketball player. I was not gifted with many athletic genes, Ward.
So you were involved in the church growing up.
That's right.
What kind of church?
I was raised in a Southern Baptist church, Millbrook Baptist Church in Aiken, South Carolina.
All right.
And went to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, and burgers and hot dogs on Wednesday and choir practice on Wednesday night. So we were in church all the time.
Yeah. That's nice.
Which is good. It was good.
Was it a good church experience? Do you look back on it? Some people have mixed reviews on their childhood churches.
Yes. That's an interesting topic that I'm going to be reflecting on the flight homeward. It was great. I mean, I think one thing that's changed dramatically, and I talked to my wife Amanda about this all the time, is we were like looking for a church for the family. My pastor growing up as a little kid was Jim Rivers, right? Dr. Jim Rivers. And this guy was like wash the servant's feet kind of guy, right? Selfless, really servant leadership. He didn't need a big house or a big car. He drove, as I recall, when I was really, we're talking 80s, like an old beat up Pinto, right? Because he didn't care about that. He cared about his calling and his mission. And when I contrast that to kind of where we are today with organized religion in so many different ways, from what I see, the priorities are in much different places. And this is a big church, right? And a lot of big churches these days,
you get a jet.
Yeah, right.
If you're in charge, yeah.
That's right. And that, different strokes, different folks. Ben makes fun of me all the time because I say that a lot, and I'm not judging anybody. It's just for me, that resonated with me as a kid, and I've looked for that as an adult ever since. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think about it a lot. I'm a really spiritual person.
Yes.
My childhood pastor was very similar to what you're saying. He lived in a little house next to the church that the church paid for, and he lived in it the whole time. And he was there for a long time. I think like 25 years he served as pastor, which in the Presbyterian church, is actually pretty rare. And I just met with him for the first time in like 15 years because he's been retired. I don't go to the church anymore, but randomly reached out to him because his wife died, and just to say hi. And then we got together for coffee. And he was saying it was almost a regret staying at the same church for so long because
that's unusual for the Presbyterian.
Yeah,
church.
And it's almost like it creates this power in a way when you're just at the church for that long and you're the preacher that it becomes yours.
Yeah.
But his point was it shouldn't be that way. And it was really tough when he did retire for his replacement to come into a congregation that's been living with him the whole time.
Yep.
And I also had coffee with one of my high school friends who's since converted to Catholicism.
Okay.
And I guess the Catholics, they do this very intentionally, and they rotate priests around from church to church. So you never know who you're getting. The vibe might totally change overnight, and he said just as a Catholic, you just say, hey, we just deal with it. And you might, but you're supposed to stay there in your parish, I guess. Yeah.
Not follow the...
It's interesting, though.
It is. It is so we go to we joined a great Methodist church in my neck of the woods, right? Yeah. And it's a lot different, but it's a lot the same. And that's probably could be said amongst all the different sects of religion, really, for that matter. But the same thing. They typically don't keep their senior pastors for a long time. So we felt blessed to have Pastor Trenton with us, I think, for a couple of years now, and it's reminding me we got to get back in church, Ben. We got to get back doing the right thing. But anyway, but it's interesting. I love your observations of the influence that your pastor had, longtime pastor, as a kid, because it's almost like your brain locks in his early moments. That's what church leaders or church pastors or whatever should be. It's probably not a fair standard to kind of go around looking, as 20 years, 30 years later for the same thing. But that was the impact it had on me.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think we're lucky because you can get into that power dynamic really easy when you're a leader of a church.
That's right.
And it's a cliche today.
That's right.
You hear about it all the time. And we were actually talking about with my childhood preacher, like he was just talking about some of these mega church guys that you get caught having affairs with people in their congregation or some kind of scandal happening, and just how we were talking about it's bad. And for me, nothing's really bad or surprising. It's almost like expected. And then it's like if you really are a Christian, then there's like the forgiveness aspect, and like everyone's human and everyone's flawed.
Right.
And so no one's saying preachers are unflawed people.
Right.
So now, should they be preachers if they're extremely flawed and making big mistakes? No, but you can at least recognize it and forgive them and say, yeah, go get a new job. But like, don't act like you're in a state of shock that this billionaire is like cheating on his wife with a young lady in the church. Like it should be almost expected, I would think.
Humans are humans.
If it happens, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but I'd also be like, you're fired, buddy. Like, yeah, you've abused your power.
That's right.
So moving on to the Scott Luton story. So you made it to the Air Force.
Yeah, I made it to the Air Force. Made it through basic training, 6 weeks.
Do you have good vision?
I had great vision back then.
Yeah.
Literally, I said that from my oldest daughter, who says it all the time. I had 2016 in one eye and like 2017 in the other eye. So I was better in 2020. Now, since then, all these computer images and phones, my vision is wrecked. But I would love to have been a pilot. In fact, the Air Force, after I went in and enlisted, right out of high school with no degree, the Air Force gave me a scholarship that took me to South Carolina, where I went to school, to get a commission, right? And I wanted to fly. I wanted to become an officer and fly. Yep. And I did not approach that the right way. I went from active duty Air Force, where I'd seen the real Air Force, and kind of what those standards were, to a college environment, right, where ROTC was a lot different, and I didn't want anything really to do with it. And I made some stupid, immature decisions and wanted too much the college experience versus the experience that would have prepared me to be an officer and make the most of that opportunity. And, we are where we are, but that is certainly a regret. I wish I had taken that more seriously, right, and really gotten that commission and gone on to have a different career. But anyway, what happened after I made those immature, wanted to enjoy beer, pizza, and other things too much in college, right?
Let me stop you. So you went to the Air Force, but as part of like an ROTC program. So you went to basic training, but then you went right into college, or
close.
Okay.
So I enlisted right out of high school. Right, they sent me basic training, and they sent me to tech school in Wichita Falls, Texas, and then I was on station in my role as a data analyst at Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina, an hour and a half from home. It's weird. Join the Air Force, see the world. I get stationed an hour and a half from home. So I was on active duty, doing my job for a full year, but the Air Force then gave me a scholarship, which I had applied for, to go back, to get out temporarily, get my commission by getting a college degree while being a part of ROTC, and then going back in with that commission.
Got it.
But I did not follow that plan. And we make decisions, but so anyway, the Air Force let me graduate. I dropped out of ROTC. The Air Force let me graduate, and then I went back in to finish my term as an enlisted data analyst. Yeah. And I did that for 2 years in Wichita, Kansas, which is, I bet if you broke out the world's longest ruler and figured out where the absolute central point of the country is, it might be a couple miles give or take from Wichita.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been there. I played some shows there back in my younger years.
Okay.
It's an easy stop coming from Dallas to get into the Midwest,
I do.
So you're in Wichita, and this is after going on your college.
That's
taking time off for college.
This
but when you went to college, you weren't focused too much on the military. No. You were more focused on the college scene. Like, who isn't? Yeah. I definitely was.
I appreciate you saying that.
I played football, I went to college to play football, and I got injured. And then after I got injured my freshman year, I stopped. I only played for one season. Okay. And then I joined a fraternity, and I did all that.
Same.
I still played rugby, but rugby's not like playing football. It was almost like an intramural sport, is how I viewed it. Compared to what the schedule was like playing collegiate football, that was a full-time job. So, but I partied, and I didn't take school seriously, and I did that, as did most of my friends that I hung out with, and most of my friends that I grew up with. So I think that's super normal.
It is normal. It is normal, and I don't ruminate about it every day, but I really when I think about what. Because when went back in the Air Force, I just finished out my term, right? Because I was ready to get out then, right? Yeah. It's kind of tough to kind of go get a degree and then, not check the box to get your commission, and then go back in enlisted with student loans and there's other things I had. So missed opportunity. That we have those in life, and I hope I can share those decisions, active decisions, the good ones and the bad ones with my kids, so they can make better use of those opportunities. But we're here enjoying what we do through a series of decisions in life, and no regrets per se, but I've always been curious about what might have been.
Yeah, so true. I think about it a lot. Like, I went to Brown University. Right. It's one of the best schools in the world, but if you look at the rankings of schools, but I did not take it seriously. I couldn't. I couldn't focus, man. I just wasn't interested in anything they were teaching me. I was interested in other things, like drinking and partying. That's when I learned how to play bass. I had a VHS tape that taught me how to play bass. And I would spend a lot more time in my dorm room watching this VHS tape on how to play the upright bass than I did worrying about anything they were teaching. And I figured out how to kind of get by at least without trying too hard. suddenly in my late 30s, I became like an avid reader and attending Tony Robbins conferences and just reading all of these nonfiction books all the time. And like, who is this person that I am today? And
we evolve, right?
I know a lot of people who made straight A's in college, and they're like kind of not happy with their job, and they don't read books at all, and they're just the opposite. They like almost got burnt out on it early. So I appreciate how I ended up here. Yes. I definitely think, wow, if I could go pick the minds of the Brown University professors today with my inquisitive mind that I somehow, have at this point of life, then that would be pretty cool. But I spoke to students at Texas Tech this week.
Okay.
I went out there to
home of the Red Raiders, right?
Home of the Red Raiders. I'd never been to the campus there before, and I spoke to their real estate club this week.
Okay.
And it was so fun talking to them. And we talked a lot about this stuff and just about kind of like real estate, of course, but also work-life balance, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, and all these things and the nuance of how that works, And I know a lot of kids that were, so many people on this podcast are multi-million-dollar a year, just amazing entrepreneurs in commercial real estate and other things. And most of them have in common that they didn't take school too seriously. Okay. It's like a common thread, almost like this reverse, no one takes you seriously for long enough. You want to be taken seriously, and you go hardcore. Like, what matters more, if you do that as an adult or if you do that as a kid?
That's right. That's right. Well,
and you can do both, of course. There's plenty of those people. I don't know them, though. They're too high up there for me to talk to.
You got all those multimillionaires on your podcast and Scott Luton. So that's a good thing. I appreciate your diversity there, Ward. But, there's something to be said for experiential learning, right? Beyond the grades. As much, I respect all the academic professionals out there. But, again, for my kids, because that's what I'm actively reflecting on and then putting it into practice, right? To help my kids see things that I wish I'd seen at their age. And so much of that is, for me, of course, school is important, but I want them to also gain from those experiences that I didn't have as a kid. And what we're kind of talking about is really closely related to that, because while I didn't have the grades in college because I didn't do the right things, I had some experiences that really, certainly, some relationships, professional and personal, that shaped my worldview. And that's, even if you don't have all A's, it's good to have those experiences that help you keep on making progress, trucking on down the road, right?
That's the beauty of life, because
right.
The experiences don't stop, no matter which direction you head.
Some days you wish they would for a little while, right?
That's right. Yeah. And then that's normally a sign that you need to change what you're doing, and the experiences probably seem to follow.
That's right.
The decisions, good or bad. And
let me share one thing in the Air Force that was important, right? So beyond being a data analyst, right? I wish I could say I did some really cool CIA stuff, but no, I was crunching numbers on that really drove maintenance actions on our aircraft, right? But during exercises, I would, they would take data analysts, get them out of the office, and give them different roles. Everyone, right, during the exercise, it's all hands on deck. And there was an exercise or two where I was loading planes. Right? I was pushing containers into the tops of our air refueling aircraft, KC-135s. And, the camaraderie, getting stuff done, planning, all this stuff, getting qualified on the equipment, like the loading equipment. I think they're called K-loaders, I think. But anyway, getting certified on these aircraft to pull up next side of these multi-million-dollar planes and then raise the container so that they could be pushed on. That was cool stuff.
Yeah.
I was scared to death I was going to hit, press the wrong pedal, and because I'm still really young. Not that young people aren't capable of those things, but for me, I was scared to death, but I enjoyed it. And logistics and the military are so it's peanut butter and jelly, right? And those couple experiences, back to what we're talking about, really opened up my eyes on the world, the really wide world of supply chain that, of course, would become really important down the road for what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So who'd have thunk?
I know. That's crazy.
It is.
My dad actually had a similar job in the Air Force.
Okay.
He got recruited or drafted to Vietnam and somehow didn't have to go to the Army because he took he enlisted in the Air Force right after he was drafted, some kind of thing like that. Like, I don't want to go to the Army. I want to go to the Air Force.
Yeah.
And he took a writing class and he passed some typewriting test. So he was stationed in Japan where he typed code. So
Okay.
I'm sure he was like in your same
That's
kind
cool.
of like that department or something, you know. within the Air Force.
AFSC, Air Force Specialty Code is what we called it. I think they're called different things, different services. But mine was 2R051 when I got out. So I'd be curious to see what your dad's is.
Yeah, I'll have to ask him. I need to get him on the podcast.
Yes.
He is resistant, but I'm working on him.
Come on, Mr. Richmond. Come on now.
That's right. So then he got out of the Air Force.
Yes.
And what did you do next?
Let's see here. I struggled to get a job. Even though I had a 4-year degree, I had great hands-on experience in data analysis with the Air Force. But I struggled to know what I wanted to do. I struggled to tell my story. And I had no network. And I didn't know how to find a job. I went to a buddy of mine, JD, who helped me out, gave me his whole Rolodex of recruiters, all this stuff. And I was very thankful. But I didn't know how to work it, you know. And I tell you, I stunk at interviews, right?
Everything you're saying is just like, is this real? You didn't know how to work it?
Seriously, I had no. It was foreign. And but Jeff Moses gave me a shot up in Columbia selling technology right before I got into industry, and he gave me my first job after the Air Force. I was very thankful. He'd been in business for a long time, taught me some great skills on life and working and all this stuff. Him and his wife Lorraine Moses, they ran this business together, and it was a wonderful first job. And then after all that I learned there, my next job was working for a small manufacturing company. That's where it started my industry experience.
Yeah. And then you kept going supply chain jobs after that?
Kept going. That manufacturing plant in Columbia, South Carolina, which is a really cool city to work, live, and play in. And it's evolved a lot since, that 20-something years ago.
What did y'all manufacture?
Partitions.
Okay.
Partitions. So, think of highly durable partitions that go into high volume places like bus stations or department stores.
Yeah.
And you don't want any graffiti on them. You don't want, if people hang on them, they're not going to go anywhere. That's the stuff we made. It was indestructible.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we at the time we sold to Home Depot and Lowe's, and I quickly learned you could never say the other person's name on a phone call unless you want to have a really bad day.
It's like FedEx and UPS.
Yes. So that was a great experience. Eventually we'd get back to Atlanta. My brother was here, and he coaxed me to come to Atlanta, really helped me out. Would get a job in industrial workforce staffing and recruiting, where we focused on warehousing and manufacturing environments. And that was a great role. That's when things started to come together. Did you have that moment? Like I can almost pin the month in my career where all of a sudden a light bulb goes on, and it's like, okay, no one is going to create wealth or no one's going to create success. You've got to figure it out, and like that path starts to emerge. Did that?
Yeah, for sure. And when that occurred is when my wife at the time, Gina, became pregnant with our firstborn child, Betty, my daughter. And when she got pregnant, I had been doing commercial real estate for 6 years, and I had okay success. I had one client that I picked up that was a really nice client to have, but then they were acquired by a larger company. And now that company that acquired them is still my client. But I was in this midst of, I had one client. They were everything I had. Then they got bought. And that was at this time when we were in transition. I hadn't been officially hired yet. And my one golden goose was gone because of this corporate acquisition. Transforce bought them, TFI out of Montreal. And it was Dynamics, was this last mile company based in Dallas. So I was connected with everybody there. But I had a really bad year. So I was in debt and all of this, and went to Colliers and talked to them. Hey, can you help me? Can you give me some money? And he gave me the number of an executive coach.
Okay.
Said, I'll pay for 4 sessions with you. And those 4 sessions, plus the pressure I felt of that I'm about to be a father and I'm broke. I need to get my act together.
That makes certain neurons in the brain start firing that haven't fired before, right?
It did. And it's crazy to think, but I'd been doing commercial real estate for 8 years. So I actually had a lot of experience, and of picking up that first big client, that was this break for me where I was able to go actually do work, and I did feel really in flow until they went away. And then I was like, I don't know how to go get another one of these. And that was my big problem then. So I guess I had the first moment when I got them as a client, then I actually learned how to go do commercial real estate, which is great, except I didn't spend any time learning how to get a client because it was almost a fluke how I got them. Like my bartender friend's dad was the CFO, and it just happened like by the grace of God did I get the first client. But all of a sudden now I had to figure out how to go. I knew how to do the work, but I didn't know how to get the client. And you have to have both when you do what I do. And that's when it really clicked by meeting with that coach. And then that's when I became a big fan of coaches and self-help books and started really pouring into that. And then it's like, okay, I understand the formula. We were talking about playing guitar earlier. It's like guitar. It's like, it doesn't make sense until it does. Right. And then you can just go sing songs and play guitar, and you don't even have to think about what you're doing. And now when that's when that really started happening for me in my profession, was right then.
Yeah.
Thankfully. My friends, I have young people that work for me, and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to have kids yet. I need to make more money. It's like, dude, have kids, then you make more money. That's the magic formula.
There's no greater incentive, motivation, you name it. But what you're describing there with industrial real estate, every role, every craft, every profession has its nuances and has its different things and stuff. But what you described, I think a lot of folks professionally, they learn the skills, they learn the job, they get the knowledge, but that next leap that clearly you've made so well once it kicked in is then they figure out how to apply it and practice it and gain confidence and can gain that repeatability. And I think that is, for me, that moment, I can almost go back to the month where that kicked in for me, but just in a different way. And I think that is what separates different layers of success. I think some folks are okay with learning and kind of just going through motions, and maybe they don't want to be an entrepreneur, or maybe they don't want to do this or do that, and they're okay just kind of in a certain like 8 to 5 repeated role, right? Yeah. And then you got other folks that like once they go through that first cycle or two where they learn, apply, there's something in them that just, it's like a flywheel effect. The more you learn, apply, and then get some rewards or gain whatever you're looking to gain, you go through, it's like these countless cycles. And that's when it's like opportunities and this journey unlocks things. And that's when certain fulfilling aspects of what we get to do day in and day out, and then learn new stuff that, it scares the heck out of you, but you're almost addicted to it, Yeah. That all of that feels like so inseparable from the entrepreneurial journey that I've experienced, that some days it's wonderful and other days you're scared to death, Yeah. But it all goes together.
Yeah, and it's part of the freedom we get to experience of the entrepreneur is also that other side of the coin.
That's right.
When there's the fear. And I know that point when Gina was pregnant with Betty, like I could have found a job working for somebody and doing commercial real estate. Yeah. I would have had a lot lower ceiling on what I could make. I would have a boss telling me what to do. I'd be doing work for them for this set amount of time. But I knew myself well enough to know, like, I'm not going to be able, I could probably get hired, but it wouldn't last long and I'd be not happy. Like, I'm going to have to figure out how to go do this on my own.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to, was never cut out to be that 8 to 5 type person.
That's right.
And anyway, so.
It's interesting. I was early in my career until that moment.
Yeah.
And then the entrepreneurial addiction started to kind of snowball.
Yeah.
Right. But I'll tell you what's, I want to jump ahead. I might jump ahead. And Ward, I was just talking to my buddy Lloyd Knight, if you're listening. Ward, you know me, I'm a planner. I've got too many thoughts bouncing around, so I always create my cheat sheets. So if you're listening and you look at me, or you're watching and you look at me, look at my notes. Hey, that's who I am. I'm a supply chain guy. I plan a lot. You're cool with that though, right?
Of course.
Okay.
I'm the opposite. I wing it.
That's what I was about to say. I don't riff too much, but all that stuff we just described, the liberating thing of the light bulb coming on and you find that first taste of success, and then it kicks off all those learning cycles and apply cycles. But you touched on something that's so important, because I think the entrepreneurial experience is over glorified so often, right? Because you see different stories that TV or movie or books amplify, and everybody's like, oh man, being your own boss or chasing after your dreams or whatever. There's some wonderful success stories, right? And that's one of the most beautiful things of the the opportunity we have here in this country, right? But to get there, right? And the tough days and the lack of guarantees. Some days, you talked about healthcare insurance. We lost our healthcare insurance along the way, and we got to figure out those problems while still trying to build a business and pay bills. All the anxiety and the pressure that can create. It's so important, I think, that we all get that out there and get that to be more visible, so we can help folks get more, help encourage folks to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm struggling and I need some help. I need some resources. And the more we can make that okay, and the more we can have all those days and the good days and the bad days be more visible, I think the startup world or the entrepreneurial world, really the whole business world, will be better off. But we're still on that journey, I think,
Yeah. I mean, it is a test in mental health to be an entrepreneur. And you have to, I dedicate so much of my life to paying attention to my own state of mental health, because it requires this discipline and toughness. And I like to think that I'm used to it to a degree, but there's still, when a bad day occurs or deals fall apart or another client gets bought by a bigger company and they're gone, and you have those feelings, it's hard not to have those moments of fear. Like, what if I lose everything,
right,
and it's all gone?
That's right.
And what happens then? And now I know better than that, but it's still the visceral emotions that come with those times, which it happens every year.
That's right.
There's a day at least, but more like a few weeks out of the year that I'm experiencing that, or maybe months. And depending on the year, when COVID happened, right? Like, it was a great thing for industrial real estate, but nobody knew that was going to happen the first month of COVID. Right. What I knew is every deal I was working on stopped, and like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah.
And things like that, of course. So
that what if cycle can be an awful one. It can be debilitating. Might be too strong a word, but that paralyzed by fear, paralyzed by you're trying to figure stuff out. was this deal going to close or that deal going to close? Is this person going to join your team, or is that person going to leave your team? Or how do we pay this bill? If we pay this, whatever. All this goes into, the day in and day out life of so many the folks that, some folks become entrepreneurs and they're gifted all the resources they need, and some of them take off, some of them still fail. But so many entrepreneurs don't come from that, right? And they got to figure out a way to make it while they're making it.
Yeah. I heard Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan's podcast, and even Mark Zuckerberg, he's constantly thinking also. Like, there's never leaving work at the office. That's something else. Like, I know plenty of people who work 9-to-5 jobs, and they tell me, yeah, like when I leave at 5, I'm not looking at my emails. Right. I'm not responding to anything until I get back there. And that's beautiful. That's like a beautiful way to live. However, it's not one that I could ever do. But
nothing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Just like it's okay. Just like it's okay for folks that can do that.
I envy that aspect of it though. Like, I don't even know what that would be like to leave the office and not be worrying about work.
Right.
But then those same people also, they have vacation days. Like, I can take vacation for as long as I want to, but I never am really on vacation. Right. Like, I might turn my email off, but I'll still be texting and checking in, and I'll probably reload my email app just to look at my email and just do something. So it's really hard to turn off, but
it's important though, I think too, as stepping away or taking the entrepreneur hat off and putting on the employer hat. What I've learned, and I wasn't always, this is something that, we learn as we go. Because 10 years ago, and if Amanda's watching or listening, she might be checking me on this number, but 10 years ago, I'll say, I didn't understand, nor was I really willing to understand that the folks that wanted to cut it off at 5, right? I didn't understand that, and I didn't want to understand it. But I think now I would like to think it's important for us to not just understand it, but make it perfectly okay and protect that work-life balance, right?
Yeah, I agree. So you were working in the supply chain, and it dawned on you like you might be an entrepreneur after all. And then what happened next? What's that next path of your journey?
So I don't know if I hadn't shared this with a whole bunch of folks, and since it's just you and me here, right? No, but it's something. It's something I had to. It took me a long time to wrap my head around, right? Because it was a deeply humbling, most professionally humbling experience, right? So I'd like to say that, after all these experiences I had, and the aha moment, and I'd build my business plan at night and work during the day, all that stuff, but it didn't happen to me. I left a manufacturing job and started this new role at an organization I'm not going to name names. And right away, I had joined for the money, and I hated the culture. I hated what I was doing, and I did not like my boss. And in fact, she did not like me and did not want me there. I was hired over her objections. Okay. Yeah. So get all that.
That's tough.
So about a month in, right? A month in of onboarding and learning the ropes, new industry, all this stuff, new sector, new products. She sets me down in her office, and she goes, "Scott, you need to have a mother here, and I am going to be your mother." And after about, 27,000 conversations like that in that first month, I just looked at her and said, "I've got a mom. I don't need a mom, so I'm good." And right at that moment, I was dead man walking. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was dead man walking. So fast forward, I want to say there I was about a year of miserable, wearing a tie every day, doing stuff I hated doing with people I didn't really want to do it with. And so I walked into what I thought was a pipeline meeting. It wasn't. I sit down, and it's my boss and HR. I'm like, okay, gosh, maybe they're going to be putting me on a performance improvement plan. In my career, I was didn't know. I'd never been like this kind. I was always very humbly, but I was always a go-getter. Well, it wasn't a pip. They gave me my walking papers right there. I had kid number 3 on the way, the young man sitting over there, right? I was thinking about the holidays. This was like September, all instantly as I'm looking at paper and like kind of signing it in zombie mode, thinking about the kids and holidays, how to pay this, that, and the other. I get out of this meeting room kind of in a trance, walking back to my cubicle. The company had already taken my laptop. They took every single thing out of that cubicle. And I'm not lying to you. They gave me a cardboard box to put my 17 things in. And I had to walk out of this highfalutin office environment with this cardboard box. Everybody knew what happened. Down a elevator and walking out marble floors there in a nice place here in Atlanta. And got in my car and talk about the what if game that we were talking about a second ago. I mean, I was shocked. I was blown away. Didn't know what to do. Didn't know how I was going to explain that to my wife. So all these thoughts were running around. Next day, the very next day, I'm talking about that was a Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, over coffee, started my first startup ever. And ended up selling that startup 2.5 years later for a bag of chips, and then taking what we learned there into my next role, small company, and then to what we're doing now. And I'm telling you, Ward, it took me a long time to come to grips with that humbling day, right? But one thing that helped me now share that with folks, because, since that time, it's been 12 years ago, all these rifts that happen in the industry, and I can really feel for people. And that wasn't a rift to me. They just kicked me out, right? But had that never happened, I still to this day do not think I would have ever have become an entrepreneur. And so it's really the best thing that ever could happen to me, because it kicked me out of the tree. And now we're building a very successful company with a team that I love working with. I'm inspired by. It's invigorating to work with these talented people that I get a chance to work with every day. And none of that would have happened if I didn't have that awful, awful day.
Wow. That's so powerful, man. You answered my next question.
So, by the way, I still have the cardboard box in my home studio that I look at almost every day as motivation.
I love that. Yeah. My first job in commercial real estate, I got fired.
Okay.
And it was a weird firing, though. It was like, you're a broker, and I was working for a senior broker. And he basically said, look, this isn't working out. You can stay at the company, but you're not working with me anymore. And he didn't tell HR management. I was just kind of there. Right. And I was so embarrassed. I'd never been fired from a job in my life. And just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I stayed there for like 6 months, kind of like going through the motions and looking for other jobs. And I was so embarrassed. And, that definitely put, I don't like to say it's a chip on my shoulder, but it was a chip on my shoulder where I had a lot of fuel just kind of building up, but it was slow burning fuel. And I just was kind of waiting, and like, I know I'm going to do something big, but I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm going to. And I deserved to get fired looking back, but I was also totally blindsided. But looking back, it's so obvious. Like, I shouldn't have been blindsided. We had enough conversations that I just didn't listen to. But I remembered them after I looked back on this, probably 15 years after it actually happened. And then I had a new perspective on it, because at the time I felt like it was, I didn't deserve to get fired, and it was his fault, not mine, that kind of thing. But that moment too, getting fired is a humbling thing. But it's also, you got to take that energy and use it for good and not for bad.
You do.
And I think I'm thankful that that's what wound up happening eventually for me. Yeah. But I always carried it with me, and I always wanted him to see me succeed. And then one day he reached out and he's like, hey, dude, you're doing good. And I was like, thank you. Let's go
awesome.
have lunch.
That
and
is
it's like,
awesome.
thank you for firing me because I deserve to get fired. And we're friends, you know, and he's one of my greatest mentors.
I love that. And I'm so glad that part of your story that you shared, because I think sometimes we can get too wrapped up that our identity is in our role or is in our company. And that can't be the case. That cannot be the case. The relationship factor you just talked about, because life goes on, right? And I would like to think, and I'm still getting there, that I should have been fired too. And I probably should have, right? I really wish it would have been handled a little different, but hey, it is what it is. But one of the lessons we applied there, beyond all the good stuff that comes with a hard change that is out of your control sometimes, right? And it takes a little time, oftentimes, to see the good in hard change that comes at you out of your control. But how in all the other changes we've had to make over the years ever since, right, that I've had to oftentimes personally deliver, let's make sure we do it and we respect the people we put in positions that are not, they're not embarrassed or anything. I am never, ever in my life, and everybody tells me never say never, ever. I'm never, ever going to put someone in a position where they get to put their dignity in a cardboard box along with their calculator and their squeeze toy, whatever, in a cardboard box to walk through an open office with everybody knowing exactly. It is the worst experience. And, we didn't have remote back then. And so it's maybe easier to do stuff in under the radar ways now. But it also is incumbent upon us, leaders, business leaders, hiring managers, to intentionally make sure that we're looking after our people, whether the first day on the job, whether it's 20 years on the job, or whether it's that day that we've got to part ways, and do so in a way that they can understand and grow from.
Now, to be devil's advocate, I don't know that she would have been allowed to fire you in that manner if that was today. It's hard to fire people today.
I've never thought about that.
It's like you got to have that meeting 25 times to get fired. But people corporate America doesn't like firing people because then you're worried about what they're going to do or say or some drama happening. I've kind of witnessed, thankfully I haven't been in the position to do it, but I've observed this happening in the culture of corporate America where it's dramatic to have to fire someone, and you better have a excellent documentation of why they're getting fired, emails, and okay, you want to fire this person? Well, let's start keeping track of their behavior right now, and then maybe in a year, if it proves that this is going to make sense on paper, then we'll consider it.
That's right. I hadn't given that a whole bunch of thought there. But you're probably right. And it's awful ever to have to make a separation, no matter what side of the table you're on, right? But for me, I am again thankful. It sounds like you gained a lot from your firing. We lean into that and we own it, even though it took me a long time to do it. And you talked about it's that slow burn, that fuel, that chip on your shoulder. That was like a mountain on my shoulder, and it kicked me in the tail. And I'm still driven, and that's probably another big part of why it's a good thing, right?
Yeah, it is. And there's nuance I find in everything. And then I don't know anyone that's successful in this world that would not give credit to the tough times for making them successful.
That's right.
And the tougher they are, those are the biggest turning points in their career, their lives, and the tougher things that people have to go through.
Well said.
Like a cancer survivor. You hear that all the time. Like if someone survives cancer, a lot of them you hear, I'm glad I had cancer.
Yeah.
Because it changed me and made me really appreciate my life a lot more.
Yeah.
So
well said.
Anyway, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, I was hoping that would be your next question. I really was. Because this one, I'm a planner again. Me and you got together, I got a sense of what you want to talk about. And this is a tough question. It's easy to rattle off some responses after thinking about it for a second. But when you start hearing yourself with advice, you're like, is that what I really would say if I gave it some thought and really pinpointed 3 or 4 things that you'd talk to your kids, and you might hope that they keep it between their ears and they make decisions with that. So I had to scratch through 37 answers. So this is what
you get a magic phone number, and it's young Scott Luton on the phone.
All right, wonderful. So I came up with a couple here. Live in the moment, which I'm pretty good at, but not plan just for that moment, because that was a big mistake I made. Getting through college, I should have been thinking further over the horizon rather than just finishing up with college. And I think that was a recurring mistake for me earlier, being way too short-sighted. So that'd be number one. I think number 2, owning your set of circumstances. I think up until I hit that moment where we were talking about and the light bulb went off, I probably did too much finger pointing, Yeah. And I think once you have that epiphany, you own it.
That is such great advice, man. It is so good.
Yeah, there's you got that victim mentality that all of us probably see all sorts of different folks owning and using. That doesn't get you anywhere, This third one's going to be debatable, I think. And I was hesitant to share this because one of my favorite times in life was working a double in the restaurant business in college, right? I sucked at waiting tables. I'd work a double, all day and go home with $27 because I could only handle one table at a time, unlike my colleagues that was just killing it. But between that double, I would sit outside. This is back in Columbia, and I was down the street. The restaurant was down the street from a bus stop, and that double would be somewhere between 4 and 5 p.m. And so the folks that had worked hard all day, construction workers, they would stream past to go to the bus stop and go home. And these folks, you could just tell, looking at their hands and their equipment, they had put in a hard day. And I would see that on those days working that double, and I would develop a profound appreciation for hard work, hard physical work, and everyone that does it, right? And I saw that too in my upbringing and a lot of my family members and all. But what I'm going to tell my kids, so Ben, you better be listening, hard work isn't good enough. It isn't good enough. It doesn't bring any guarantees. I've seen in my journey, you might have too, I've seen some of the hardest working people that deserve so much more than what they get. But we can't stop at hard work alone. You got to, if you really want a lot more in this life, hard work will work for some people, but not everybody. You got to have a process, a plan, an idea, a vision, some kind of value far beyond the hard work side. And I think going back to that victim mindset, I think it's something that I'm hoping my kids understand. Just because you work hard 40 hours a week doesn't mean everything's going to break in your favor. And I think the more they can be prepared, no matter that these wonderful people deserve it. And we got to have I would like to imagine we would have a society that rewarded all these incredible people that make industry move forward, that work hard alone. I wish we could give more of guarantees. But I think overall, young people will be better off if they know that working hard every day doesn't come with guarantees in life. And I think that's an important distinction.
That is an interesting bit of advice. I totally understand what you're saying. And I was telling those kids at Texas Tech, actually, because my friend and I were both speaking. He went to Tech, and he brought me there with him. And he's call himself a workaholic, just an addict. Like he's incredibly successful. Philip Lang, he's on the podcast. And I said, I'm kind of the opposite. I don't like to work. Like
that's what you're saying?
Yeah. And I don't. I've never have. That's why I got fired from that first job. He told me to do something in a week, and I figured out how to do it in 2 hours a day instead of 10 hours a day.
Okay. All right.
Was it as good as it would have been if I did it in 10 hours? Probably not. But did it get the job done? To me, at the time, yes. But I've always had that mindset, like, how can I get as much done with as little work as possible?
Yeah.
And I think, and why did I do that back then? Because I like to drink. And I did that in school too.
Yeah.
I wanted to drink as much as possible, but I also wanted to not like be homeless. So I would do the things I needed to do to get through college. I would always just do the bare minimum kind of to succeed. And then whatever the bare minimum was that I needed to do at that stage of my life. But it's funny, when I stopped drinking, then I had all of this free time, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? But I'd become quite successful, even though I was prioritizing drinking so much. But I became successful because I forced myself to do a lot of work in as little time as possible. So it taught me efficiency and delegation in a way that I like is great. And then I went to, Tony Robbins conferences and hired executive coaches. And I just kept tripling down on that. Like, how can I create processes that are super efficient and easy to teach other people to do these things that I do, and not take so much ownership and me having to do everything? Because that's a problem I think a lot of people get into, is they're just doing everything and they're doing it all the time. Now I would say, not only is this like a great weapon of mine and I don't have to work as much, but it's because when I work in this manner, my work that I do is so much more potent, because I'm taking the time to do the things I'm really good at doing, that I really love doing. Okay. And then I have spaciousness to reflect, and because creativity is a huge part of running a business and coming up with new innovative ideas. And it gives you the ability to step back. If I'm negotiating a deal with you and we talk every day about that deal for 300 days, and then I need something at the end, would it be more powerful if someone who had been talking to you for 300 days asked you, or if I came in, the other me, who you haven't talked to in 300 days, but you know who I am, and I'm the boss, and then I say, hey, I don't bother you too much, but I really need a favor right now. Then what impact is that going to have? It can have drastic impacts.
Yeah. For you, wherever you point, I'm signing for Ward Richmond.
Exactly.
Just so you know.
Exactly. But if Ward Richmond's asking you to do favors all the time, then they're not going to be as important to you.
That's right.
But if I limit the favors I ask, and this all comes down to being mindful, and it's just mindful use of your time and your energy and your power and like what you're good at doing. And I think that for me has come naturally, because and it's not that I'm not a hard worker. So plenty of people would tell you that I'm a workaholic too.
Yeah.
And that could be the case, but
that's what I've always been struck. That's the impression I've always had from you.
I don't feel that way though. Okay. I joke. I say I work all the time, and I also never work. So I don't know kind of what's what, but I know that I could work if I didn't want to. If I wanted to do everything, I'd be like literally working 100 hours a week or something. Mm. And I don't want that life though. So I like to bring in partners, and then we can all help each other do the things we're not good at doing. And then that is what really makes a business great. And to build that business piece by piece, where I can walk away for a year and the business is still fine. Yeah. Now, it's not going to be growing the way I want it to be growing, probably at the rate I want it to be growing, but will it be okay? Yeah, I think so. I'm confident in that. And anyway, it's just interesting to think about, but I'm super mindful of how I use my time that will best serve me and the business. Yeah. Because I'm going to get burnt out if I'm not doing it this way also.
I love hearing your evolution, and I love hearing the different stages in your journey you just kind of walk through, especially how that led to you consciously using your time differently, your career and your gifts differently, right? I think one of the thing on that, I think we also need to dispel. Yeah, I think all of us, I think a lot of folks in the industry tout their workaholicness, and that's probably I'm not as you can tell, I'm not a psychologist, but that probably isn't healthy. That probably isn't healthy, right? But one last thing, we're talking about all the stuff, advice we give kids or a 17-year-old Scott Luton that's in basic training, missing his mama every hour. That's bad, Ward. There was a kid when I was a senior in high school that I told you I wasn't athletic, right? I couldn't even call myself average. I'd play all the sports, but I did it because I enjoyed it, not because I'd score 30 points a game, whatever. So I had weightlifting, right? Ninth grade. We all had to take weightlifting. And there was this kid that was built, was bigger, a little shorter than me, but he was built, right?
Yeah.
And he would tease me all the time, and he punched me in the chest. Happened all the time. And I always thought about punching him in the nose, right? Just taking my shot, I would have gotten my ass kicked, Ward. I'm just telling you, I'd have been beaten down. But perhaps it would have stopped it, right? Perhaps it would have. I would have stood my ground, right? And kind of like what's the movie with Michael J. Fox where the guy finally
Back to the Future.
Yeah, finally hits Biff, right? I wish I had hit that guy in the face. And I'm not preaching violence.
I had one of those too.
Did
man.
you?
Yeah, and I did the same thing. I never hit him in the face.
I never did.
I just dealt with it when I was in middle school.
Yes.
I was too scared.
And, so if I had me, especially in that moment, or I always talk to my kids because, look, schools hadn't gotten any easier, right? Middle school and high school is still as tough now as it was then.
It's hormones, I think, right?
It must be. Yeah. It could be a bunch of things probably, but I don't want them to deal with that day in and day out. It wasn't every day, but it was regular enough. And I want them to punch that person. I want them to stand their ground, right? And stand up for themselves in a way that I was not willing to do. So punch that kid in the nose.
So, and what you're saying is so relevant to everything else we're discussing. And that business coach that I told you about when Gina was pregnant, one of the things we discussed, I was in a kind of a business partnership then too that wasn't working out. And what he said is there's pain and there's suffering. And he said pain is better than suffering. Pain is ripping the Band-Aid off. Suffering is this accumulation of just think of a bad business partnership that you just sit in and it feels like a weight's on your shoulder and you can deal with it.
It just festers. The suffering is
and that's like this guy messing with you or whatever. But the pain would be, you might get your ass kicked, but you're going to punch him in the face and really hard. And the chances are that he keeps messing with you the same way that he was. Yeah. I feel like that. I mean, that's a different scenario. I never found out because I was too scared to do it. And thankfully he got kicked out of school because he was a thug.
Yeah.
And, I grew large and in charge, so people stopped messing with me.
Yeah, no kidding.
That also spurred me to lift weights and become a great football player. I didn't want to get picked on anymore. It's not that I didn't become a good fighter necessarily, but I became very strong, and thankfully I grew very tall where no one messed with me, so I never had to get in fights.
So really quick clarification, because you were talking about probabilities of what chances were. You'd never seen the Washington Generals beat the Harlem Globetrotters, right? Well, I had a Washington General chance against that guy back in the day. So let's just dispel all that.
Yeah. Have you seen Dazed and Confused?
It's been a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, there's like a kind of a nerdy guy that he's getting just totally like
stuffed in a locker or something.
Accosted. They were at the beer bust out of the Moon Tower, and they're drinking. And this guy Clint is the kind of jerk guy, and he's driving a hot rod, and the nerdy guy walks by, and Clint's like yelling at him. He goes, "You know what? I'm just going to go over there and I'm going to punch him in the face. And we're at one of these parties and everyone at the party is going to come break up the fight anyway. So I'll get out of there. And that's exactly what happened. And then everyone's like, yeah. And it was over. Yeah. But it was just like he got his punch in. And I mean, how many people feel that way in high school? That's why that's such a great movie and such a great scene. Because everybody wants to punch the bully in the face, and most people don't.
That's right.
Most people just suffer through it. That's what I did. That's what you did. Yeah. That's what is great advice to give to your younger self.
Just stand up for yourself.
Stand up for yourself.
I'm not preaching violence. My kids know because we talk about those balances, and I kind of, in some cases, I've had to kind of ask them about what they would do if the situation got a little bit worse in different places. But whatever it is, whatever that means to you, standing up for yourself is a great habit and practice to develop, right?
Yeah.
There's something I was going to, by the way, I love that pain and suffering. That's what I was writing down. I'm stealing that because I think that is universally applicable on so many different levels. And I think we are empowered in so many different ways to stop suffering, right? And whatever that means to you, business-wise, personal-wise, whatever. But we choose. Sometimes we choose to let it go on and on and on, right?
Often. And so many times you don't realize the weight that you have on your shoulders from all the suffering, because it can just be this thin, energetic layer that's compounding and compounding until... if you're like me, or I try not to be this way anymore, but then you explode, right? And then you lose it. But if you can identify that when it's happening, and then it's typically as an adult, that is not like living in a scene where I get in fights with people physically, but it's just this mental suffering that you go through. It's one uncomfortable conversation nips it in the bud.
Yeah.
And the fear that you have going into that conversation is very potent and it's scary. 99% of the time, it's not near as bad as what you think it's going to be. And the suffering ends immediately and your life vastly improves.
Yes.
But it's like taking that step to have that conversation is so tough.
Yeah.
But Tim Ferriss, one of my favorite authors, he says, like the thing that you need to do that you don't want to do most or fear doing the most is the thing that you most need to do.
Yep.
And that's the answer
great advice
to it. Yeah.
One last, as we're beating this dead horse, but
yeah. It's a good one. It's worthwhile.
It is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Have the tough conversation. And oftentimes, kind of to your point, it's going to be so much better afterwards. Sometimes the complete 180 happens. I had a really tough conversation with a dear friend, old CB, if you're listening, and we joked about it for 20 years, 25 years. We had a very difficult conversation early in that relationship. And because we had it and we were able to kind of be frank with each other, out of that was a much better relationship and a better friendship and many other things. So have the tough conversations. That's another, I need to add that. It's number 5 on the list of advice. Where are we going next there, Mr. Ward Richmond?
Have you ever had a mystical experience?
I should have looked up the definition of the word mystical to best give you the best answer. But as I've been kind of listening to some of your shows and kind of getting a sense of how I would speak to this, for me, it comes as a faith and religion, right? And I can tell you, a friend of mine, a mentor of sorts, 10, 12 years ago, sent me this Harvard Business Review article. And it was all about a couple studies that have been done on entrepreneurs and their level of faith. And based on these surveys and the data and all, it came to find out that entrepreneurs tend to have stronger and deeper faith. They tend to pray more every day. And that resonates with me. I don't know if it resonates with you. It resonates
100%.
with me, right?
Yeah.
So it's really cool to kind of see that science support, it always dukes it out with religion, but in that case, it supported my religion and my personal journey. So when it comes to faith and religion for me, I've seen lots of what we'll call God sightings, or there's been these different parts of my journey where my faith and the ability to believe that this too shall pass, this day, the sun's going to come up. There is a plan in the universe. There is a greater plan at play. All of that, and my personal belief has gotten me through and pushed me through, dragged me through in some cases, different parts of my journey. So absolutely, I'm not sure how you would maybe some of your mystical or religious experiences, but I see it every day. And my last thought there is that when you wake up in the morning, and in the fall in Georgia, there's been two or three places in my life where the sunrises and sunsets are just like mind-blowing, right? Wichita, Kansas, believe it or not, it's so flat and the skies are so open.
That makes sense.
Oh, it's crazy. Key West. I can't remember the beach where it's just famous. But in Georgia, in the fall and the cold weather, I don't know if there's some science behind it, but the sunrises and sunsets are just remarkable. And just the other day, one of my favorite things to do is pick up the kids in the afternoon, take them in the morning, and pick them in the afternoon. And we dropped them off. The sky that was being painted. I mean, for folks that don't believe, hey, different strokes, different folks. But I have to believe that the good Lord that makes that happen is doing other things in all of our journeys, right? And that might sound cheesy and dramatic, plenty, and that's fine, right? To each their own. But for me, it's like we get easily in the worst days, we get two beautiful pieces of proof, artwork of proof that there's a bigger plan, bigger being, a bigger force in play in this universe, and that's what came to my mind with this question about mystical experiences.
Yeah, I think there's nothing better for twice a day mystical experience than watching the sunrise and the sunset, and just
Amen.
Take that in with gratitude. Yeah, and the prayer, man. I'm sure I said these prayers to God throughout my life. Like, I've always believed in God, had a conversational relationship with Him, mainly in my younger years to ask for forgiveness or for help in really tough situations. But when I recently, like within the last few years, I started just really intentionally giving thanks and just saying thank you, and finding as many things as I can find to say thanks for. The people, this experience doing this podcast will be on my list in the morning. And then not only that, like, thanks for this time with my friend Scott. Thanks for Scott making it to be an entrepreneur and starting Supply Chain Now and being at this logistics conference that I sponsored, and I got to be on your podcast because I was a sponsor, and I did a podcast for the first time. And I said, man, I love this. And I reached out to you like the next week, like, hey, awesome. Can I do another podcast with you? And I want to do that again. And then that whole journey, I mean, I think that was 2018, maybe 19.
Around there.
Yeah. I think maybe 19 it was, who knows, yeah. But and then we're here. Your son's in my living room. What's up, Ben? And
speaking of proof of the good Lord's work, I mean, kids.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm even on some days it's easier to celebrate their blessings than others, right? Right?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but you're
but that's just it's just all so it becomes just ingrained. It has become ingrained in me. And the gratitude aspect is its own mystical experience, because it seems like the more things you can find to be grateful for, that just breeds more things to be grateful for. Right. And you start thinking about it. And then it's easier to get through the day and to be thankful and not be in the other realm of feeling like a victim and feeling pissed off and feeling like the world's against you, because then you start focusing on those things and they feed themselves. And that's mystical in its own right, because that teaches you, if that basically, this has happened to me before, and it pushes you into a corner where you're in such a state of suffering once again. And this is all, there's not the mean boss who wants to be your mom. This is yourself. And I found my greatest, opponent in this life is myself.
Yes.
And I can go push myself into that corner. And those times when I've done that, making bad decisions and not being in a state of gratitude and choosing chaos over peace and making decisions that do not serve me instead of those that do, then you get to that place where, frankly, for me, I think it could be die or bust through it and go to the light. And when that happens, and which has happened to me multiple times and probably will again, that's like those powerful obstacles that you overcome is just those with yourself. And then that has never been able to happen without the presence of God for me too.
That's right.
Anyway.
Well, hey, well said. That gratitude thing you mentioned, folks out there, if you're listening or you're watching and you're rolling your eyes, I'm telling you, the power of gratitude, I've felt it thousands, if not millions of times. And, there's plenty of non-grateful people that are incredibly successful, but I don't want to be like that. I'd rather have no commas in my bank account, right? And I've been there, but be immensely grateful because the quality of life and just what it brings in your life, it is worth every penny.
That's right.
And you also mentioned the I'm your mom and the boss thing. I think one of the things I think is really important, and you might can relate to this too, is you learn so much from the best bosses and managers and leaders in the world. And you also might learn even bigger lessons from the worst people you ever work for or work with. And all are important, right?
That's right.
And they're all in their own weird ways are blessings and fate for going through it, right?
Yeah.
So whether we like to learn the lessons and apply them or not, it's our choice.
I think parents fall into that category, and they always will. And I know that there's a great way that I know a lot of people who have really difficult relationships with their parents. They're just a lot of people will.
Sure.
And I've been through that with my parents at times. I love them very much. We're great friends, but I've had those moments where I didn't want to go hang out with them. And one of my friends said, you got to recognize your parents are actually your greatest teachers because they've known you longer than anyone else that's ever known you. So they're at least your longest term teachers. They've taught you more. Unless I guess you just get separated from them or something. But in general, they've taught you so many things. But then you got to find gratitude for the good things they taught you, and gratitude for the things that you don't, that maybe weren't so good. Yeah. And then me as a parent now, I think about those and I try to whittle it down. And at least from my perspective on this is I try to learn from things that drove me crazy that my dad did to me. And I try not to do those things to my kids, but I have my own set of things that I'm sure are going to annoy them well into adulthood. And then they'll hopefully I'm going to tell them the same thing. I'm like, hey, be thankful for this thing I do that annoys you. And then don't do it to your own children.
That's right.
Hopefully that's a gift I gave you.
Love it. I feel that in my bones. I feel that in my bones.
So, thanks for sharing all that. Now, I like to get some advice. What is your favorite restaurant?
Favorite restaurant, Potluck. Right now, and there's lots of them, but Potluck in Monroe, Georgia, and it is a typical Southern meat and three. Wonderful people own it. Wonderful people work there. Me and Ben love getting up on Saturday mornings and go and having a sausage biscuit and some eggs and waffles or whatever. And it's the type of restaurant, when I do whatever I'm gonna do in this industry, right? And I can invest in a cool little corner restaurant if I'm ever be able to do that. It's the kind of place that I think every town needs. And I would love to sit there on the paper on the behind the cash register with the newspaper, and just watching people enjoy and talking and just fellowship around a great plate of food. So potluck. I know this is supposed to be more rapid fire. I wish I had more rapid fire in my repertoire.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
So
we go real deep on the first half, obviously.
Okay, all right.
So
how about you, by the way?
Restaurant?
Yeah.
Oh, it changes. When I asked myself these questions, and I said Javier's, which is a Mexican place here, but I've really been falling back in love with the All Good Cafe here in Dallas, which is where I worked and waited tables when I was in my 20s.
Really?
And I'm still real tight with the owner, and I've just been on a kick lately of going there. So it's really it's a phenomenal place, and it's cool. Some of the same people that worked there when I was there 20 years ago still work there.
Really?
Yeah.
When you said that, it reminded me of a great show, a great spinoff of an even better show, Saul Goodman, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the favorite scene is when he gets asked, "How'd you come up with your name?" And he goes, "Saul Good, man."
That's great. That is great. I hadn't heard that.
I'll do more rapid fire on these others, okay?
And I know we've been talking about Ben a lot, but so another great thing about supply chain now is you get to work with your wife.
That's right.
Amanda.
That's right.
And
big blessing.
That's cool. And you have 2 other kids?
That's right. Ben Brantley is my oldest.
Okay.
And Gracie Lou is my middle child. And I am so fortunate between Amanda and being able to work with her every single day. She's our fearless production leader. She has a lot more hats than that. And, she's my counselor every,
I bet.
hours every day, right? That's important to have. But the best kids. And they are a lot of common threads between them. And then there's also all the kids, they've got a unique elements of their personality that we're uncovering hour by hour.
That's great. Yeah, Ben approves. That's good to hear. And also, I didn't really talk about this too much, but tell me about supply chain now.
Sure.
Because I know, but I want to hear your perspective for the listeners that don't know what you have built and when it started and where you are today, and talk about that, because I think that's just a phenomenal story.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate the kind words. More importantly, I appreciate all of our collaboration over the years, starting from that point that you were talking about, the trade show, to now, and all the points in between. But after working in a variety of roles across industry, right, from manufacturing to a lot in manufacturing, whether in the industry or supporting the industry, right?
Yeah.
And then rubbing elbows with all these incredible frontline workers, which is one of my favorite things to do. Get out. I've been in over 300 manufacturing or production sites in my career. Gotten plenty of tours. But my favorite part always was the people part, right? So really, after having a career full of those experiences, how can we tell the story of not just those frontline workers and what they experience, but how could we tell the story of innovation, disruption, challenges, new ideas, old ideas, all of it, right? Because our industry needs a voice. It needs its story to be told. So all that we launched a podcast. Actually, we launched lots of webinars years ago, right? And I really figured out I really enjoyed the facilitation of all that on all ends, the technology part, the conversation part, all that stuff. So eventually that gave way to podcasting, live streaming, webinars, the whole digital media platform that we are today, where we're telling an endless amount of aspects of this incredible industry that that enables us to, have what we need whenever we want it, right? And as much as technology in this golden age of technology powers all that, and that in and of itself, plenty of stories to be told. For me, it's still about the people, and it's about the people that don't get enough attention. Our truck drivers, our forklift drivers, our machine operators. We've got to change that, right? And that's one element of our mission at Supply Chain Now, but it's a big part of it. So, folks, if you want to be a part, you can find our podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Trademark, right? I think every podcaster, I think, says that, right?
That's right.
And come, bring your ideas, bring your voice, and let us know what's on your mind. So that's a little bit about Supply Chain Now.
How many episodes?
Oh, goodness. I want to say, so I talk about this a lot. I think we've talked about this before. Episode numbers, as I've learned through all of my digital media journey, they're only important to the hosts, the creators, right? I bet you know, and I should know now. But since they're not important to everyone else, we have dropped including the episode number on our show.
Yeah.
But we're somewhere between 1,300 and 1,400 of podcast episodes. And then we've had hundreds more live streams, webinars, online events, all that stuff, in-person events for that matter.
Yeah.
We're going to be this year alone, we're going to be at, Manifest, ProMat, Gartner Supply Chain Symposium, and SAPIX in South Africa, right?
That's cool.
It is cool. And, the in-person, as much as I've enjoyed following you on social and catching up with a text or a phone call there, the fact that we've been able to spend time in person yesterday and today, it's just been like the millionth lesson reiterated to me that it can't be replaced. We can do business and meetings remotely, all that stuff. Not saying we can't, but man, the in-person, that vibe that is there is irreplaceable.
Frankly, I do these all in person very intentionally because of my experience with you, because we would do them in person until COVID happened. Yep. And then we started doing them on Zoom, and I just could not be as engaged. And I felt like a significant energy shift in the podcasting. And I mean, obviously we're in COVID. It was no one's fault. We're just doing it. And I've been on plenty of Zoom podcasts also other than yours. But I really, the only ones that I had done in person were with you in Atlanta, and those were different.
Yeah.
And so when I started this, I made it a point. It's like, unless Tony Robbins wants to do a Zoom podcast, like I'm doing them in person. And at the end of the day, whatever happens with this podcast, all I know now, and I love keeping track of the episodes, but I've done a lot of these myself without a guest, but like I've done 100-ish episodes in the last 2 years, which also means I've had like 190-minute conversations with people who I really like, where we get to talk about life really deeply. And if no one listens to it, that right there is just like amazing life experience, knowledge gain, reflecting on things that I've never reflected on before. And that is just that purpose behind it is magic.
It is.
But doing it in person is just takes it to the next level for sure.
Well, and clearly what you were talking about earlier, just a few minutes ago, about the gratitude, it's so evident in how you described all of that in the last minute of just how grateful you are for each of these conversations, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think makes great interviewees, great content creators, because their brain isn't. We're not flipping ahead to, okay, how are we going to publish this? How are we going to promote this? You clearly are able to stay in the moment because you appreciate that moment as you're creating each of these conversations. So I know, Ward, this is going to be a massive year for Truckin' On, and I cannot wait to see what's next.
Heck yeah. It feels like such a good way to end it, but I have more questions.
I'll be brief. What you got?
What's a book that you would recommend?
So Ray Tia, former guy who used to work for, published a book called The Fearless Frontline. and it's a wonderful read. It's fact-based. Any organization can benefit from it, and all at the center of it is this run, improve, grow model, where how can we do away with the cape wearing that happens in every organization. Let's put out the fires, and let's free up people to spend their time in more quality, fulfilling, productive components of the business. Ray, I hope I got that close to right, my friend.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. And then what about a quote?
There's lots. I think what's timely, it's not necessarily my favorite quote, but what's timely is give me good news fast, but bad news faster. And that was a quote I stole from the pickle company. The stork is their mask.
Classic.
Yes. The second generation son, the second generation leader of that of Vlasic back in the day, that really built the company into being a Titanic. That was his mantra to the organization. He wanted to be the first to know, not just when it was time to celebrate, but when it was time to take action. But more recently, this trip in Dallas, my son says I say different strokes for different folks all the time, and I guess that's more of a quote that goes to who I am in this world of beautiful and a wide, eclectic mix of walks of life and beliefs and leanings, all that stuff. It's not up to us to have to understand or, let's let people be themselves. And I say different strokes for different folks all the time as a way of hopefully they develop that same worldview.
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, what about a charity or cause that you're passionate about?
Dave Kreche Foundation. They raise nonprofit based in Atlanta that raises money and equipment for kids that don't have and families don't have the wherewithal to play sports. And we all know those fees to play organized sports these days, the equipment needs, it's expensive. And they just let us know that what we did as an organization last year enabled 70 kids to play sports. So there should be a Dave Kreche Foundation in every city in the world.
So cool. So what's your favorite vacation destination?
This is going to make people snicker, and that's okay. Edisto Beach in South Carolina. We went there, small, quiet beach, family-friendly, low-key beach. It's not highfalutin like the Caymans, Grand Caymans or anything,
Yeah.
But it's just there's a lot of emotional ties to it, and I know what I've got to bring down there. I know what few stores that are down there. I love the coastal part of the East Coast and South Carolina in particular, and it's a great place. It's a great place.
Amazing. And that, my friend, is all I got.
So
tell people where they can find you.
I appreciate that question, Ward Richmond. And I'm grateful that this weekend they could find me right here in your podcast studio because I have had a blast.
That's right, brother.
SupplyChainNow.com, right? That's easy. Stay tuned for a brand new website. We're going to have all sorts of new content on it. That's quite a project led by the team. And then, of course, wherever they find their podcasts. But you know what? It's not good enough just to find us, right? We do live programming all the time. And my favorite part, just like those interactions I had with all these plant tours with frontline workers, the interactions we have is people are dropping what they think that we're talking about. That's the secret spice of life.
Yeah.
So don't just listen, be a part.
Comment on it.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, much gratitude for this experience, for you making your way over to my house on a Saturday while you're here in Dallas with Ben. And I hope you guys have a great time here in my fair city of Dallas, Texas, the remainder of the weekend. And great seeing you. Thanks for trucking on.